Welcome back to this latest edition of our cult classic TV series. And as you know, if you've been following us for last month, we've been looking back at last year or so. We've been looking back on iconic cult classic TV series, which have really stood the test of time. And obviously one of those franchises we've been looking at has been the iconic Battlestar Galactica franchise. The reincarnated version, which ran from 2004 to 2009. And we're delighted this evening to be talking to one of the stars, the iconic stars of that sort of TV series as well. The one and only Tricia Helfer, who played the character Number Six, but also fascinating above this, Tricia, as well. People remember you for Number Six, but you've had so many other names. I was just Caprica, Natalie Frost, Gina. So in terms of Battlestar Galactica, people will say Tricia Helfer, Number Six, she was a Cylon, a sort of such. But you played also, for people that aren't aware, you played also sort of different characters or different sort of human sort of roles as well. So it almost felt like each time when you're playing those sort of roles, or you're playing a different sort of character yet again. How exciting was that, not to be associated with Six the Cylon the whole time?
Well, they were all versions of Sixth the Cylon. They were all Cylons.
Yeah.
So I wish I got paid for each one. Wouldn't that have been great? Paid separately for each one. No, for me, I was a brand new actor. It was my first series. I'd been acting for a year, and it was a great, opportunity to be involved with Edward James Olmos, Mary McDonnell, the quality of actors that were on the show. And then to get to have all these different characters and really be able to show some range, because I played Caprica 6 in the beginning, and then it kind of melded into Number 6. And that was most of the first season and halfway into the second season before although I did have Shelley Godfrey in one of those seasons, but before they really started showing the different characters. And to me, that was, it came at a very pivotal time for me, because I was getting a little bit bored of playing Number Six, of the one that nobody else could see, because I felt like she didn't really have a storyline of her own. And, she's kind of seductive. And so when Gina came along, Gina Inviere, I think was her name, in the Pegasus episodes, that was really, just as an actor, a huge, not joy is the right word, but it was just really interesting to play, and to be able to make these characters that were inherently the same, but their experiences with humans and their experiences in life had altered their view, all slightly different, and to find the little intricacies that and the little differences was challenging and fun as an actor to be able to play.
And I remember talking to Michael Trucco, and he told me sort of a funny story. We all know the Battlestar Galactica set. It was absolutely massive in terms of ship, and the amount of people that got lost in terms of stories, in terms of was sort of unique. But Michael Trucco told me actually one day he got lost himself, and he walked on a scene in terms of backstage, and he actually walked in on a sort of when you were actually shooting in terms of and nearly fumbled over the set in terms of trying to find these sort of way. In terms of that, did you ever see a set like it in terms of its detail? Another actor told me as well, Grace Park told me the involvement of Eddie Olmos. Eddie Olmos had his touch in absolutely everything in terms of its authenticity, he wanted to make it feel old and run down, and when they're offering sort of modern things, he said no, that was sort of realistic as well. Were you sort of blown away by the absolute sheer enormity, first of all, of the scale of the set, and then obviously by all those sort of finer details? And can these, Trisha, you mentioned there, you put your hand up. Did you get lost as well?
Yeah, well, the corridors all sort of look the same. So when you were on the Galactica, you did kind of end up walking in circles sometimes. You just be like, I'm in another corridor. I can't find my way to the stage door to get outside. And we all kind of learned our way eventually, but it did take a while, because you would just, keep going, and it was sprawling. And I think we had 3 or 4 sound stages at the Vancouver Film Studios. And yeah, I mean, it was just one of those rare experiences where, you know, the writing, the directing, the acting, the produce, everything just worked. And the passion of the people involved and the collaboration was pivotal. And it was, you know, like you said, one of the other actors said Eddie had his you know, hands in everything, and it was true. But we all did. Like, we all cared. I mean, Eddie is Eddie, right? So I mean, he certainly came into it with the gravitas to be able to say no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, right? But even us that were younger or starting out, and we all felt like we had a say. And we would be listened to if we had a question or if we had a suggestion. And sometimes, I think, much to the crew's chagrin, our blocking, which is when you're going over a scene, kind of rehearsing it and figuring out where you're going to walk and what you're going to do. And sometimes those blocking sessions would go on for hours. And because we were all just really collaborating and trying to figure out what worked best for the scene. So oftentimes actors are told, no, you basically don't have a say, just shut up and say your lines. And this is where you're going to walk and this is what you're going to do. And that wasn't the case with Battlestar. I mean, ultimately, yes, there was the bosses that had the final say, which you need, of course. But it was a hugely collaborative show. And everybody in turn was very passionate about making it the best that we could make it.
And one thing that actually struck me, and in terms of speaking to sort of revelations that came about, Grace Park actually told me when she originally auditioned for the Starbucks sort of role in terms of what actually got cast as sort of Boomer, and then what you call Aaron Tamo Pennicott actually auditioned for Apollo, but didn't get that. And Chief Terrell Aaron Douglas actually auditioned for another role. He auditioned for Halo, but got cast as Chief. Was that sort of a trend? Did you actually audition for any other role apart from Six yourself?
I didn't. No, I only auditioned for Six. But my audition story was I auditioned the very beginning of, I remember specifically, it was January 6th. And because I had just been acting for a year, and it was my first audition after the Christmas season. And I thought it went really well. And then I didn't hear anything back. I heard it went well, but then didn't get booked. And it wasn't until 2 months later that I got called back. So I got called back in March for another session, and then a work session with the director, and then had to test for it. And so James and I think we were the last testing session.
Okay.
I mean, James Callis and I got it, but for Baltar and Number Six, we were the last people cast out of the lead roles, and we were the first people on set. So we had our testing session with the studio network, and like 2 days later we were in Vancouver filming, and we were the first people to film, but the last people cast.
And Trisha, I've got to ask you now, we know in terms of James Callis' as ability as an improv actor, but how hard was it for you half the times to keep a straight face when you saw him talking to what must have been sort of blank hair, and obviously going through his nut, obviously looking like an absolute raving lunatic, I suppose, talking to four walls and no one talking back to him, and then obviously he's talking to you in certain scenes? Was it very hard sometimes not to start to say, right, cut, I need to let it go, I need to clear my throat, I need to get a laugh out here for a second to try and keep it all together in terms of that? Because James, when he went off, he certainly knew how to went off. It was absolutely, yes. He could act to his own reflection, I imagine, in terms of his shadow back and forth all day long.
He certainly could. You know, it was funny because I think because James and I had so much together, and so much of those type of scenes where, you know, you couldn't see me, we got very used to it quickly.
Okay.
But it would be whenever somebody else, it took longer for other people in the scenes that weren't in the scenes all the time, to get used to seeing him talking to nothing or not burst into laughter at something that he did. And oftentimes if it was a wide shot and you see him talking to the room, I wasn't actually in the set because otherwise you'd see me. So I would be saying my lines off the set. Or I would be hiding under the desk, and then, you know, we'd time it out perfectly with the camera guys that when the camera slightly panned this way, then I would appear but oftentimes I was hiding. I was literally like hiding behind something. So I didn't actually see him sometimes do what he was doing because the camera would see me. Okay. But it became so comfortable and normal between the two of us that, you know, that was our dynamic. So I of course he made me laugh sometimes, but it was always interesting to see new people in the scenes. I remember when Richard Hatch came in for the first time and was in one of the scenes with us where I think I'm draped over his shoulder in one part of it, and he kept forgetting his lines because he's like, this is so weird, you're literally leaning on me, but I don't know you're there. And so I think it was harder for other people coming in.
And one thing I suppose with Battlestar Galactica as well, Trisha, I just want your viewpoint on this, was people were blown away by the everyday, day-to-day life issues that they were able to propel on this crew. And I suppose people think of the original Battlestar, they think of people getting into these aircraft carriers, flying out in space, shooting sort of Cylons in terms of rapid air guns, sort of epic ship battles. And don't get me wrong, there's an awful lot of that in Battlestar Galactica. But the topics that you touch on as well was racism, sex, drugs, alcohol dependency, depression, suicide, gender inequality, discrimination, all aspects, people with gambling addictions, every sort of emotional element that is involved in human nature or human psyche as well. She sort of covered it within those actual 4 seasons, which was amazing. We all remember Candice McClure's suicide. We have sort of things like lost pregnancies and abortions in terms of that. So in terms of that, how was that to cover so many vital elements in a space? Let's call it what it is. It is a spaceship type, space series, sort of, not Star Wars thing, but a space trooper type element sort of thing. It's mind-blowing, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, well, I think being that it was a space show, I think sometimes it gave us the liberty to be more direct with some of the topics that we covered. And you know, the writers did it brilliantly with always kind of being on that line of, you know, here's your heroes, and now your hero is failing or struggling or doing something that you think is wrong. And it wasn't just, you know, there's the bad guys and the good guys, and it really showed the human condition. And when you know, being under extreme circumstances. And I think viewers could relate to many different aspects of what these people were going through, and also what these Cylons were going through. Like in, you know, especially in later seasons, you start to empathize with the enemy, right? And I think that's what the show did brilliantly, is really put a mirror up to us and our society and show us that, you know, there's so many different aspects to the same conversation, depends on from which lens you're viewing it. And so some of the topics were hard to portray or to you know, deal with, but at the same time, that's part of acting. You're telling stories. So for us, it was, you know, we had a lot of lighthearted moments on set. So, you know, you're having fun and you're doing your job. And then when you're doing a really heavy scene or episode, you allow it that weight. And, you know, there were scenes when I was doing Gina and, you know, tied up in the cell, I wasn't jovial in between scenes. I wasn't, you know, getting up and joking around. I stayed there tied up. You know, they worked around me. They changed the lighting around me. I wanted to stay in that moment and stay there and feel that. And that's one thing that the entire cast and crew were cognizant of. They knew when you could be jovial and joke around and get the scenes done, and they knew when the actor needed or the time to just sort of sit in it, and that you were covering a heavy topic. And you know, when I think it was just done brilliantly that you have, you know, Adama, who you see this man that, you know, almost all the time you agree with, and you know, you want him as your admiral, and then some of the decisions he makes, you like, I'm not really agreeing with you right now. Or in later seasons, we see him, you know, turn to alcohol, or, you know, completely just lose it in some scenes. And you relate to these characters so much, even though they're in space, but you relate to them from things you've gone through in your own life. And I think certainly in our society now, and it's almost more relevant now than it was 15 years ago. You know, I just did a rewatch and a podcast about the show, and it was striking to me how relevant the show still is,
Yeah.
and almost even more so. And, you know, we've all, the entire, you know, globally, we've gone through we're all in really difficult times right now globally, with so many different things, race, pandemic, you know, fighting, division, everything. And so having a show that you can just go, whew, I can relate to that, but it's set in space, so it's still fun to watch. You know, it's not like watching the news. I think the show's timeless in that regard.
And Trisha, the penultimate question, the second last one I have for you now, in terms of, before I let you go, in terms of Battlestar as well. In terms of, one thing that struck me, you had the original cast, right? You had the elders sort of statesmen when you started off, Eddie Olmos, Mary Lou, Michael Hogan, and sort of such. And then you had the sort of new, sort of younger cast maybe at that time. And probably it's a fair reflection that a good lot of you were starting out your sort of careers at that sort of stage. And really, Battlestar, for an awful lot of you, it catapulted your careers after Battlestar. So many, the cast went on to so many different projects. Grace Park to High 5-0, for example. You had Katie Sackhoff going on to Riddick, the Manchurian, yourself. Do you think for a lot of you to land on such an iconic sort of show like Battlestar Galactica, that if it hadn't come at your doorsteps, that the success that an awful lot of the younger cast have had in their career so far, that might have come about if it wasn't for Battlestar Galactica?
You know, you can't say. You can't predict what would have happened, what wouldn't have happened, right? Certainly being part of a show that is well revered within the industry as well. It's not like it won Emmys and that type of thing, but it so many creators of other shows respect the show. So certainly it helps. I mean, it didn't hurt any of our careers, that's for sure. But who's to say somebody, you know, if Aaron Douglas hadn't gotten Chief Tyrrell, maybe he would have gotten something else, you know, that took his career in the same trajectory, just in a different way. So I don't really know, but I certainly think that, of course, the show did not harm any of us. I think it only helped, and still continues to help. You know, I got into voiceover work because of the show, because there was some producers of the video games that wanted Number Six's voice, and that's how I got into voiceover work, and then have taken it past that and into, you know, my own career doing voiceover. But I got my first job voiceover because of Battlestar. Okay. And I'm sure other actors on the show have had similar circumstances, or got jobs because, you know, somebody, you know, the director loved them in Battlestar or something like that. But that's how the industry works. That's how the business works. So I certainly feel very fortunate and lucky to have gotten the show early on in my career, for sure.
And Trisha, the final question now, I'm probably way over time. Apologies. Trisha, let's pretend there was a Battlestar Galactica, let's say a dictionary, encyclopedia as such, and they put your character, I've asked everyone this question, so I've done 12 or 13 of the cast, so everyone's got this question, so don't feel it's probably the hardest one I'm going to ask you. Let's pretend there was an encyclopedia sort of such, and they put your character 6 into that encyclopedia, and they left 2 blank sentences underneath in terms of its description, in terms of the synopsis of that character. And the people who are doing the encyclopedia rang the agent, and they got on to you and said, listen, we want Tricia Helfer to write those sort of 2 sentences in that encyclopedia of the Battlestar to describe what 6 was like, her portrayal of 6. What would she like what would you like those 2 sentences to read?
Oh gosh, that's one you should have given me that one in advance so I could think about it. I'm not a great like spur of the moment person. Well, I'll jokingly say one of the sentences because Ron Moore, he did a series Bible.
Yeah.
And created, so when we started the show, we had this series Bible to go off of, and all the main characters had like 2 or 3 page backstories. And my character had 1 short sentence. So I would reiterate Ron Moore's words in one of my sentences, which was simply the machine as woman.
Machine as woman. That's very good.
And so, but I would probably elaborate on that and say something to the effect of, I don't even know. I don't know how to describe it, but to get across that everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own, meaning my characters, each, but you could relate it to multiple people too. But in my own world, everyone had their own hopes and dreams and wishes and loves, but they were all intrinsically linked.
On that note, Tricia Helfer, an absolute pleasure talking to you today to relive some of your memories talking about Battlestar Galactica, and no doubt the iconic character number 6 will be relevant for a long time to go. She set the role bearing of the role that has to be played, and it's an envious role for any future actress that has to take on that role. So on that note, Tricia, we let you and we let your piggy and we let your cat and we let all your other animals get some loving attention from their owner there, and obviously the cat, I'd say, is tired now from me talking for the last 20 minutes or so. So we'll let him get back to his attention from his owner. But Trish, an absolute pleasure, and thanks for doing that for us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.